before transitioning into electron microscope mode with this button over here, it's important to take into account which settings you should best use for your particular application of scanning electron microscopy. To do this, go into the Settings tab in the software. In this menu, you have a variety of options for how you want to go about doing your electron microscopy. First, in the mode, you have 3 different options for the amount of voltage you want to apply across your sample. If you're going to be doing mapping or any sort of analysis on your sample, you should do 15 kilovolts to allow for all of the fluorescence peaks to be able to be read sufficiently when you're doing your EDS. If you're just looking for a high resolution image, go ahead and defer to 10 kilovolts. That should be sufficient. Otherwise, you can go ahead and just pick 5 kilovolts if you are not doing any analysis. But, like I said, if you are going to be doing anything with EDS, you're probably best off doing 15 kilovolts. In terms of intensity, this is more specifically referring to EDS and some of the various techniques you can do there. First off, there's low intensity. That would be more applicable if you aren't doing any form of EDS and you would rather just take images. Also, the image intensity is usually what I stick with when I do imaging. The low intensity usually doesn't provide well for me, so I do usually stick with imaging intensity if I'm just doing images. However, if you are planning on doing point maps on your EDS, go ahead and pick the point intensity. That'll improve the resolution that you require. And lastly, if you are planning on doing mapping in your EDS, which we will cover a little bit later, go ahead and select the mapping intensity. That will also work rather well. In terms of detectors, I would usually keep it on BSD full unless otherwise specified. Nothing in particular of note with the resolution and quality here, unless you wanted to make a smaller image for some reason. But for the most part, if you're doing something for some scientific purpose, you're probably looking to get the higher levels of resolution. Time and date are pretty self-explanatory. You can change those if need be, or if something like daylight savings comes up. But the important thing down here is the label. You have the option of being able to label your images, which is something that can be seen on your image at the bottom right here in this region. This label can be useful because if you are processing your images at a later time, it may be useful for you in terms of keeping track of which images correspond to which samples. You can change the label by clicking on this toolbox here and using this built-in keyboard to actually change your label. There's not, in its current configuration, a keyboard directly hooked up to the SEM computer, thus you have to use this manual keyboard. Once you're done renaming it, go ahead and hit this little enter button, and that'll save whatever your label is. The next thing to note is that if the system is in hibernation mode after being in standby mode for an extended period of time, you can go ahead and switch that around as necessary. The last set of features to note is some of these settings up top here. These are mostly relating to the little bit of information at the bottom of your image that will be generated alongside of it. You can configure whether or not you want your magnification, your field of view, date, time, label, and other various parameters inside of that little label at the bottom of the screen. The last little line here is corresponding to what sort of image file you will produce when you take your image. TIFF files are rather large. They are a mostly non-compressive form of image taking, so you really won't lose any information. So if you are doing something like porosity measurements, that might be nice, as you won't run into the issue of compressing your image and potentially losing data. JPEGs will be smaller images, do compress a little bit, so if you are doing post-processing and image processing on whatever your SEM photo is, keep that in mind that JPEG may not be quite right for you. I'm not quite familiar with BMPs. I would assume that's another form of compressed image file, but further work should be done into that.